You thought he was done? You thought the takes were too hot to handle? You better think again. He's back with even more scorching opinions, more controversial predictions, and the kind of truth bombs that only Zain Bando can deliver. If you missed the first round, prepare yourself. This is the follow-up you've been waiting for. It's time for Zan Zinger Part 2, another certified hit from the Empty the Bench Network. Here's your host, Zain Bando.
All right, well, welcome everyone to a new edition of Zain Zinger Part 2. It's the first time this show has been on a Monday. You usually see this on a Sunday. Tom and I had to swap this week. Nonetheless, hope you are doing well. My name is Zain Bando. Thank you so much for tuning in and stopping by on this Monday morning to check out a new edition of Zain Zinger Part 2. A lot to get to in this stream, so let's not waste any more time. But before we do get to the stream, let's take care of a few quick particulars. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the ETB Network. To do so, please go to youtube.com/ETB Network. Again, that's youtube.com/ETBNETWRK. Would be greatly appreciated if you guys checked out our channel. That way we can get closer and closer to our goal of 3,000 and then eventually 4,000 watch hours as we continue to build our subscriber count, as well as we inch closer and closer to 2,000 subs. So shout out to you guys already that supported the channel. And if you don't, please be sure to go and check that out right now as we are streaming live to the ETB Network YouTube channel, as well as several of our network destinations, including Forever Power 5, MMA Outsiders Press Row, Bando Breakdowns, and my Twitter account, as well as my YouTube channel. So we're on pretty much everywhere. Of course, you can check out all of this on all of the different destinations. But if you're not watching on YouTube, please be sure to go to our YouTube home. My name is Zain Bando. I'm a sports journalist and an ETB Network co-host. As per usual, you can check out my work over at MMA Knockout on Sports Illustrated for everything related to the UFC and mixed martial arts. You can check out my collegiate work over at the Sporting News, as well as Ohio State on Sports Illustrated, and every instant UFC recap you could possibly think of over at Field Level Media. And of course, many other syndicates across the internet. You can listen to the flagship show, Bando Breakdowns, wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, all the live archive stuff is over at the ETB Network YouTube channel, as well as my own. But some of you guys do like the RSS feeds as well, so figured I would plug that. And then, in case you guys are tuning into this stream a little bit late, I wanted to plug this as well. You can catch typically Sunday's replays and or episode on YouTube and X. Because of what I just disclosed at the beginning of this, we are live on Monday. So shout out to all of you guys who are here. And then a quick programming note, this Thursday, Bando Breakdowns episode 98 will be live. It'll be Thursday, July 16th, 3 Eastern, noon Pacific. It's the first time we'll be going on Thursdays, and we'll be going on Thursdays moving forward for the actual show itself. So that is a quick overview of what is to come. We will also plug some network programming as well a little bit later on in the stream, but excited to get started with everything here this morning. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in, and let's get into the stream while we can here. Let's start with the UFC 329 recap. That is what you guys are all here for me to discuss, as I have not talked about this post-fight. We did a lot of pre-fight coverage leading up to this in the month leading up to this event, but we did not really do our due diligence post-fight. We were not on with Tom Albano for his post-fight stream, and we have a comment in here. Shout out to the Hitting for the Cycle podcast with Ben Cruz, Ryan Toohey, and David Waitman for reposting this. You can catch their show every single week talking about all things Major League Baseball. But nonetheless, UFC 329 this past Saturday. If you guys are tuning into the stream, you already know what happened. And in case you guys don't know, I will tell you. So the highly anticipated main event of the evening at 170 pounds between former two-division champion Conor McGregor and former UFC featherweight and BMF champion Max Holloway took place on Saturday night from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. Going into this fight, I really didn't know what to expect other than the fact that overall, I thought for the most part that it would go a lot differently than it did. As we all know, it only took 69 seconds for this fight to end. Conor McGregor losing this fight on a catastrophic knee injury, the opposite leg that he injured at UFC 264 against Dustin the Diamond Poirier all the way back in July of 2021. Very anticlimactic ending, to say the least. It's not the fight that everybody was anticipating it was, but what is interesting about this, though, is just the overall fallout from this fight, because the fallout from this fight may actually be even bigger than the actual fight itself. So let's get into some of the fallout if we can here. What exactly happened from a fallout standpoint is video is beginning to emerge of Conor McGregor struggling on his way to the octagon during his entrance, and particularly taking his shoes off. He takes like a misstep with his foot, and it was just very bizarre as to what happened. And then all of a sudden, the fight starts. He throws that wild kick, which, by the way, people talking about, oh, why did he throw a kick? Well, if you look at most of McGregor's UFC career, he throws a lot of those wild kicks to begin the fight. The first Dustin Poirier fight, prime example. The fight with Diego Brandao, that's a prime example as well. He throws a spinning, turning sidekick, to begin his fights normally. And he didn't do the same thing here. He tried to throw a jumping roundhouse kick, and it didn't quite work. Now, the strategy for that, people are confused by it, but I just explained that's a primary weapon of his expertise. But in this particular fight, people were confused as to why he was doing it, just considering the fact that he had been out for so long and we didn't know whether or not his legs were going to be compromised or not. They clearly were. And he was injured essentially from the get-go. And again, it only lasted 69 seconds. Conor McGregor gets hurt and dropped, throws a few up kicks, tries to stand up. He can't stand up. And Max Holloway pretty much tells the referee to call the fight, and he calls the fight off. And the reason why Holloway did it, a lot of people think, oh, McGregor quit and stuff. And you could make that argument if you want, that McGregor quit. A lot of people have said that. I'm not one of those people to say that he quit. What I think is interesting, though, and this is real, he actually said this because the audio is out. Holloway essentially stopped the fight because his family was in attendance and he didn't want to see McGregor take any more damage. That's at least the what the fallout from that is. But what I do think is interesting, though, is just the level of just sheer magnitude. And yes, I will get to the viral tweet. And I know people are waiting for me to talk about it. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, there's a sports radio host and analyst who used to do stuff for UFC Fight Pass, and he made this viral tweet, which is essentially an accusation that the UFC knew that Conor McGregor was injured. Okay. Now, there's not much that I can really speak to this, but what I can tell you is I can let me just play devil's advocate. I can understand from a UFC's perspective why this fight eventually went ahead. I think there's a couple reasons for this. And to me, it's all business related. Number one, the UFC went through a very similar situation, but a little bit more heightened when McGregor injured his pinky toe before his scheduled fight with Michael Chandler. As we all know, that fight never happened, right? They had to scramble and reshuffle the whole UFC 303 card, had to put a new main event together, Pereira versus Prohaska, right? We all know that, and we all know how that played out. Pereira knocked him out, obviously saved the whole card and became a huge star, right? That was when he was the light heavyweight champion of the world, right? So let's just say for some odd reason, it was sort of known out there in the universe, but not really talked about, that McGregor was dealing with injuries. He's claiming he wasn't. He's claiming it was a freak accident when the fight started. John Kavanaugh, same thing. John Kavanaugh, for those who don't know, that's his head coach, right? And I don't know. What I can say, though, is from a business standpoint, the $25 million gate, the 20,076 that showed up to attend the fight, from a business standpoint, obviously, the UFC does not want McGregor not in that main event with how much marketing they had done. I'm not saying that his tweet is correct. What I am saying, though, from a business standpoint, it's a huge risk to make any sort of changes, even though the UFC is known to have done so on sometimes hours' notice. This one was so big and the marketing was already done for it and all the promotion was done for the fight that to pull it at the last minute would have been a disaster. Now, by Nevada law, if McGregor was injured, everybody who bought a ticket gets refunds. Okay, that's very important. So if it eventually comes out later that he was hurt or something, then I think all those people would be entitled to refunds. But a very, very interesting scene at the T-Mobile Arena. Obviously, we're going to get into this in a second, but I'm just going to tease it now. Max Holloway has said he doesn't want to fight until 2027. I have an opinion on what I think Max Holloway should do, and I'm also going to give you my bold opinion on what I think is next for Conor McGregor, and I do not think it is what people think my opinion is. So let's just say that, and let's jump right in. What is next for Conor McGregor? Well, as of this morning, Conor McGregor put out on Instagram that he is remorseful and that he is trying to do his best to get back to full health. He's using his praise in God for this. He wants to fight the last fight on his UFC contract. I don't really blame him. Obviously, he owes that to the UFC and he owes that to the fans. And I'm sure he knows that he can't go out like that. He can. He knows that. You don't come back after 5 years, look in air quotes the way you did, because he didn't really look like anything. We barely saw what he could do. We barely saw what he was capable of in those 5 years off. So taking another fight, which would be the final fight on his deal, I think would be a smart thing. Now, let me answer the question here. What's next for him? Well, he lost a lot of leverage because now he got injured. It goes down as a loss on his record, and that's now, what is it now? I think it's now, he had lost 2 in a row. So that's now 3 losses in a row and 4 out of his last 5 fights. So, but it's a weird 4 out of his last 5, right? Because he was injured in 2 of those. So technically, if you take 2 of those away, it's really 2 out of his last 3 with air quotes. I'm not trying to defend him in any way, but let's just call a spade here. Those outcomes of those 2 fights were extremely bizarre. They weren't legitimate, not legitimate, but they weren't, he didn't get viciously TKO'd or anything like that. Now, the argument could be made that in the third Poirier fight, if he doesn't get hurt, he was on his way to getting TKO'd. I get that. But in this case, against Max Holloway, not even remotely close. The fight had barely gotten started, and Holloway knows that too. So the UFC could do a multitude of things. And this is going to sound like a bold prediction, and a lot of people disagree with me on this. But I think what's next for them is identical. I think you have to do this trilogy fight. And the reason why I say that is because now it's 1-1, but those in the know kind of know that this fight was not the way that people expected it to go, right? And now think about some of the other options if you were to just go away from this fight. Carlos Prates, he's telling McGregor publicly that he shouldn't fight him. Okay. Obviously, there is still Michael Chandler out there. Does the fight make a little bit more sense now that Chandler is sort of on a tailspin and it's McGregor's last fight on his deal? And could, Michael Chandler finally get the payday that he's been waiting for? Yeah. The thing that the UFC can't do, in my opinion, is give McGregor some sort of title shot. Okay. It would make absolutely no sense. Now, it would be the old school Tito Ortiz, Ken Shamrock playbook when Ken Shamrock had lost, I think it was 6 or 7 in a row going into that Tito Ortiz fight, the first one at UFC 40, right? I mean, from a business standpoint, does it make sense? Yes, but do they want to risk McGregor catastrophically injuring himself again and a fight between Gaethje and or Makhachev really never gets started? I don't know if they're willing to risk that. So I think if he were to return, there are a lot of options, but I do think they can't give him a title fight. They're limited in who they could give him. I think his three, if he were to have 3 options right now, to me, it would be Nate Diaz, it would be a Max Holloway trilogy fight, or it would be probably his third option. I don't know. Maybe you do. Who knows? Maybe you. I don't know. I know, he's going through his own stuff, but Dana did originally want a Dustin Poirier number 4 because of how strange the third fight ended. So I don't know. And maybe you throw a 4th option in there and maybe it's Chandler. Okay. So there's that. That's what I think is next for him if he chooses to come back. A lot of people don't think so, but I believe him when he says that he will be back because I don't think he can go out like that after everything he's done from a in the cage standpoint. This isn't out of the cage. This isn't legal, but in the cage, I don't think he'd want to go out like that. I don't think he'd want his last fight to be remembered as him getting hurt after all he's done to elevate the sport as a whole. Now, what is next for Max Holloway? This is kind of important. So I'm just going to be honest with you. Who's next for Max Holloway is nobody right now. And I'm going to explain why. The division is in such a log jam that I think the smartest thing for Holloway to do is wait. Okay. He's clearly now a contender, quote unquote, in 2 divisions, really in 1. It's mainly lightweight. But if you want to say he's a contender at welterweight, you technically can because by record, he does hold a win against Conor McGregor. So there you go. I think he's a contender in 2 divisions, but I think it would be dumb for him to stay at 170. I really do. And now I could hear it now. Zain, he's cleaned out 155. 155 is his natural weight class. There's still fights out there for him to fight. He still has not fought Islam Makhachev. He still has not fought Ian Gary. He still has not fought excuse me, I got my weight class mixed up. But that's true too. If he were to stay at welterweight, he has not fought either of those guys. But the Justin Gaethje rematch is still out there. He's already beat him. Would he want to beat him again to win the title? And that's a perfect, retirement capstone, if you will. I understand Holloway is 34 and he still has a few years left, but in fighting years, he's been around a long ass time. So does he want to go out a legend and knock out Gaethje rather again? I think it's more than likely possible. We have a comment in here. This is a question from Nick Morganson. Do you think it was odd that Max Holloway called for the trilogy, knowing it would be a long haul for Conor return? Also awkward right after the fight ended. And I'm going to say no. And the reason why I'm going to say no is because Max Holloway knows that was just the easiest fight of his life. He wants the real Conor at as close to perfect as possible so he could really beat him. He probably feels like in his mind he didn't have to do anything to win, and he didn't. He didn't even touch McGregor, and he still won the fight. So no, I don't think it's awkward. He's got to call his shot when he can. he knows he has limited shelf life still left in the sport, and he probably wants another payday. That's my thought process, and honestly, good on him from a business standpoint because he knows McGregor is always going to be the biggest name that he will ever fight. And if he can go in there and fight him again and legitimately beat him, it leaves no stone unturned that it wasn't a fluke, this past Saturday that he won. And now this time, if they were to do it again, he could go out and win convincingly. And he even admitted it. He said he trained super hard for the fight. He wants to talk to UFC brass. He wants to talk to, Dana and Hunter and figure out what they want to do. But I think that's one of the few options right now out of all the nothingness that I said that would make sense. And I say nothingness because as I started the segment, right now, he doesn't really have any matchups at the moment that would make sense because of just bookings and timing and that sort of thing. So I think it's all really fluid. I think he can take the rest of the year off, chill. He doesn't need to fight right now. You will not see him fight. My prediction is you won't see him fight until Q1 or Q2 of 27. That's my thought on that. Let's move on now to some additional UFC 329 performances. I did really well in this card. We went 11-3 on this card. There were some awesome fights. There were, I think it was 11, and what's funny is 11 of the 14 fights were by finish. There were only 3 decisions from what I can recall, and I can even triple check this, but I was looking at it yesterday, and I'm pretty sure it was a banner night for the UFC because of how many finishes there were. Let me go back and look at this here. Yeah, I went 11-3, and there were, let's see here, how many decisions were there? Let's see here. Oh no, these are just predictions, so I gotta go down here. Let's see. Yep, 3 decisions. We had Mario Batista beating Corey Sandhagen. We had Kong Wang beating Tracy Cortez, and we had Farhad Basharat beating the debuting John Garza, who actually fought really well for as short a notice as it was. I think he deserves another fight. But there were some awesome finishes. We had a stretch of 1, 2, 3. Oh, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive KOs that included knockouts for Luke Riley, Adrian Yanez, the debuting Gable Steveson, Robert Whittaker, King Green, and then, of course, you got to go all the way up a little bit more to find the best submission of the whole card, which, of course, was Paddy Pimblett beating Benoit Saint Denis in the co-main event, which obviously saw the emergence of Sophie Cunningham as a guest ring card girl. I can't believe I'm saying that, but she did a really good job. Figured I would mention that. And obviously, Dana did pull up to watch the Aces play the Fever last night. So he really is a true Sophie Cunningham fan, if I've ever seen one. But overall, though, this card was awesome. Besides the main event of the evening, I would give it an A-. Over-delivered. It felt big until the McGregor fight. It felt like the momentum was building the whole card. There were some great fights on this card. It was worth a rewatch for sure because the rest of the card was great. The biggest stock riser, no question about it, Paddy Pimblett loses no fans after the Justin Gaethje fight. His only UFC loss to date. And look at that. There you go. He is now very much in the mix in a crowded lightweight division. Obviously, Justin Gaethje is out there at the moment, but I do think Justin Gaethje probably has other plans for who he may fight next. I think there's a lot of options for Gaethje, and I would argue that the Topuria rematch is out there, but also because of the bad blood from a couple years ago when Ilya was champion, I think Ilya versus Paddy Pimblett would be a great fight as well. So I think any way you slice it or dice it is awesome. But overall, though, great card from UFC 329. Let's wrap up with 2 more topics. But before we do that, let's take care of some programming business on the network front. I've been meaning to do this. Let's take care of this right now. We have a busy week in sports, or not in sports, but in our, I guess, programming realm. So let's take care of a few things here if we can. And let's talk about this. Callan's Cranium with Callan McClurg, airing Wednesday nights at midnight Eastern or Tuesday on the West Coast at 9 p.m. Pacific. When the lights go down, the deep dives begin. Join Callan McClurg for Callan's Cranium, airing Wednesday at midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. This is a late night journey into the psychology, the strategy, and the fascinating oddities of the sports world. We explore the angles others miss and the stories that define the mental side of the competition. If you're looking for a perspective that stays with you long after the final whistle, go inside the cranium every single week, only on the ETB network. Go to youtube.com/ETBNETWORK to find out much, much, much more as we continue on here with this stream. We'll go probably about another, I would argue, 10 or so minutes, I would say, roughly, just given that we have a couple more topics to get through as well. And what else would there be with this? Let's go with, who knows? Oh no, what am I saying? Let's move on now to the World Cup, as we were about to do here. Let's do that. So the World Cup is winding down. It's reaching its rightful conclusion. Let's go over who is still remaining in the World Cup, and I will give you briefly my finals prediction. All right, in the two semifinal matches, we have France versus Spain and England versus Argentina. One of them is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. The other one is on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I've got probably France versus Argentina. That would be my guess, and I think Argentina probably wins the World Cup. I just think Lionel Messi has been playing out of his mind. Argentina finding new ways to win, as controversially as it may seem. And I think as long as they keep winning, they will be in a great position. And I think getting to the final is really the ultimate goal here. But who knows? I think France is a tough out. They're a physical team as well. Spain has found new ways to win, but I just think Argentina at the moment has too much depth there. I think they win the World Cup. And if they don't win it, they will at least get to Sunday's final, which is at 3 p.m. Eastern. All of these games are on Fox, so don't miss them. And obviously stay tuned for more Empty the Pitch with Callan McClurg and Trevor Williams, as they will take you deeper into the semifinals and the final of the World Cup. So shout out to them as well. And they've been doing great work over on that front. And it seems that show may end up continuing. Moving over to the other football, Big Ten football preview. As promised, we would go over the top tier teams last week. We went over those, and I made those very clear. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Indiana. This week, we're going to go over some of the mid-tier teams, and that will be some surprises. One of them I wanted to start with, though, is Illinois. And the reason why I wanted to start with Illinois is because they really have a lack of depth going into the season. They had to replace a lot of key pieces from a year ago, including quarterback Luke Altmaier. They replaced him with Caden Hauser from East Carolina. Obviously, he has some pretty good numbers to chill for it, with 72 touchdowns in his career to this point. I think this Illinois team has a chance to be pretty good. They obviously have a lot of new faces, as I just alluded to, but I do think their schedule is favorable enough for a 8-win, 9-win season. There's a few tough games in there. You got to go to Ohio State to open Big Ten play in September. You have a tough road trip to UCLA. You have a very good Iowa team coming into Champaign at the end of the year. You have some softies in there too. You've got Maryland in there. They're going to be very average. And in fact, they're another one of my mid-tier teams where you just don't know where you sit with them at the moment. They have a Nebraska team who could be very okay. They obviously don't have Dylan Raiola anymore. They have Michigan State on their schedule. Obviously, Michigan State just hired Pat Fitzgerald to replace Jonathan Smith. That'll be interesting. I mean, to me, the two guaranteed losses out of the entire season for Illinois, to me, are Oregon and Ohio State. It's these other couple that you don't know. I think they could be the floor, to me, is 6-6 for this team, just given how many pieces they lost. They should be bowl eligible. The ceiling for this team is anywhere from 8-4 to 9-3, but realistically, I think more than likely 7-5, 8-4 would be ideal. But to be fair, though, that's me discrediting my own alma mater, given that they've won 19 games in the last 2 seasons. I think it's 19-8 in the last 2 seasons, which is a remarkable turnaround if you're Brett Bielema, especially considering where they were in 2023 following that 5-7 year, and you didn't quite know when things were going to turn. Illinois looking to make its third bowl game in a row. They've obviously won a bowl the last 2 years, knocking off South Carolina in the Citrus Bowl, and of course, on a last-second field goal this past December against a very, very, very dangerous and difficult Tennessee team that had a lot of chances to win that game, but let it slip away because Luke Altmaier was the master of the 2-minute drill. Moving right along to some other mid-tier teams that I just don't think are all there, and in fact, this next one could be in the lower tier, are the Maryland Terrapins. Mike Locksley is entering year 7 of this regime in College Park, and I just don't think it's all there, man. He has some skill, talent players, but the schedule is just too hard. The recruiting just hasn't been very good. They had a really rough back half of the year after a really hot start in non-conference play. I just don't really think this team is all there, and that's a major problem when you have a coach that just can't seem to find consistency. And if they can turn it around, they'll do some good things, but we'll see, man. We'll see. It's very, very up in the air right now in terms of where Maryland sits. Some other teams to highlight, and I know that I probably should put this team in the lower tier, but I wanted to highlight Purdue in the mid-tier just because Barry Odom is still their coach. Barry Odom is a good coach when he has the right talent around him, but right now, Purdue just has too much to rebuild. Should they be in the bottom feeder teams? Probably. I would give him that. But I just think he's a good coach. He'll find ways for them to at least be competitive. They may not win a lot of games, but they will still be one of those teams where it'll be like, okay, he's at least building a foundation. You have to give Barry Odom at least 5 years to fix this. It would be a disservice if he were to dip earlier than that, rather, just because of how much work he has to do to fix this team. Wisconsin is another one of those teams where I don't know. Luke Fickell, a huge year for him. A lot of people think this is the year to save his job. CBS Sports has Wisconsin going 7-5. I don't know if I can buy that. Wisconsin has a semi-difficult schedule. It's not as bad as a year ago, but there's still going to be some games where it's almost a guaranteed loss. So Luke Fickell is going to have some explaining to do. And then Minnesota, man, they just can't seem to break over that hump. PJ Fleck is a good coach, but for whatever reason, they just can't capitalize off big wins to, elevate them to that next level. They thought they had it 2 years ago when they beat a very good Illinois team, which ended Illinois CFP hopes. I was on the field for that. And even though Minnesota had a good end to the year, it wasn't what, Minnesota fans were hoping for. They were hoping for maybe this is a springboard to like a 9-3 season, and that didn't happen. So I don't know. I think the mid-tier of the Big Ten, you could slice or dice it any which way you want, but those are the 4 teams I would look at here. Now, Purdue probably could have been swapped for Nebraska, but the 4 teams we went over today, just as a quick brief reminder, we said Wisconsin, Maryland, Illinois, and Purdue. And if you want to throw a 5th in there, let's throw Minnesota in there. I probably could have swapped out a couple of different teams for this mid-tier category, but we're going to get to the lower tier in the coming weeks as well. It may not be immediately in episode 98 just because we very quickly did this and we want to give it some time to breathe, but those are the 4 teams I would look at. So there you go. That's going to do it, though, for another edition of Zain Zinger Part 2. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the ETB Network. Please go to youtube.com/ETB Network. Follow the show on social media at Bando's Breakdown. And, of course, you can follow me at ZanBando99. For everybody here at the ETB Network, I'm Zan Bando. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. Shout out to the 187 of you who tuned into the stream, almost 200 people for the day. So we greatly appreciate it. And we always value your insights and just being able to just sit here and watch this is extremely awesome for all of us. So whenever you guys want, feel free to drop any comments just to get if you guys needed to. And then I think there was one more comment here. I forgot to mention this. Kavanaugh Royval fight of the night. Yeah, I would 100% agree. That was a great fight. Lonnie Kavanaugh is a stud out of England. And of course, Brendan Royval has a lot of exciting personal things on the way, including a new baby. So that was a huge win for Royval. Obviously, I was in attendance for his fight a couple years ago against Tatsuro Taira, and he's always been a title challenger to look out for. Hopefully that win, still keeps him in that upper echelon of a very crowded flyweight division as well. But again, that's going to do it, though. Shout out to Nick for participating as always, and thanks so much once again to all of you who tuned in. Have a great rest of your Monday. We will catch you guys next time. Have a good one, everyone, and cheers. Thanks.